What is up? What is up, guys? Welcome back. It's another freaking video. My star. See, I was literally talking about that in my last one. See, like most people who watch me, you guys probably be able to think to yourself, oh, like yeah, he thought of that as a intro and then decided to do it. Like, and now I'm starting to think that's probably what a lot of, if not all YouTubers, like. I did not sit here and think to myself, you know what would be cool? You know what would be real catchy? You know what would sound really good at the start of my video? Is me being like, what is up, guys? It is Monster back with another freaking video. Like, bitch, no, I did not think about that. Like, I literally was just being, and half the time, it's me, like, geeing myself up. It's like a little ritual for myself, like, to gee myself up, bring my energy up, you know what I mean? So that I'm able to see things from a higher perspective, whether I'm feeling like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this video, maybe I feel a little bit unmotivated, whatever the case may be, I'm like, rise above it all. Check out my song on YouTube, Rise Above, spelled Raize, Rise Above, okay? Talk about that shit, and I added the E at the end, because it's actually Rise there. We're adding that air, aka we're solidifying, we're adding time, we're putting ice to it, so we're able to encapsulate it, we're able to save that, we're able to savor that energy of being rise, being able to rise above all of our bullshit, because you don't want to be in the bullshit, you want to be above the bullshit. And why, when I first start the video, now my nose starts getting all itchy on the side? What is that? My nose was perfectly fine before, then all of a sudden, you jump in the video and your nose starts acting up. You know what I mean? So, whatever spirit is in those little nose hairs that maybe inhabits that booger, or that bacteria, the spirit that inhabits that bacteria within the booger is like a foreign entity. It's like it doesn't want, or it doesn't, not that it's actively thinking, but it doesn't resonate with the energy that I'm pushing out right now. You know what I mean? So it ends up acting up. It's like, oh, this is not a space that I like to be in as a spirit. This is not an expression that I like to do as a spirit. Despite the fact that I'm a bacteria in a grand, greater essence of spirit, I'm going to choose to go against this energy and decide to do what I want to do in this moment. You know what I mean? So I'm going to bring this itchy vibration and feeling to this person's nose, even though they don't, may not be aware of me as a being personally. You know what I mean? But we're all in the form of an energy exchange in general. So onto the topic of the video, guys. What the heck? First of all, before I get onto the topic, I'ma smoke a helicopter. All right, we're flying helicopters up here. If you know, you know. You know what I mean? So we're flying. We're flying. That's where I'm gonna go right now. I'm already flying, but I decide to fly a little bit higher. I decide to fly above my desire. I decide to rise above all that good shit, all that hood, that. That just reminded me of that song. Anyway, I'm gonna take my mic off. Alrighty. Let's get back on. So yeah, when it comes to all of that stuff, talking about rising above, talking about this world, Okay, back to the topic of the video. That's where I was. That's where I was. Imagine this video is not even streaming to YouTube. The fucking audacity that YouTube would have to not be able to receive much. Lay down. Lay down, man. Lay down. Stay down. Anyways, enough of my fucking tangents, I swear. This is me, this is me at the moment. At this point in time, tangents are high. So there may be, certain energies within me that are teetering towards that Geministic state of being, like the floated state. Then goes back to that Taurus state. That's where it's like, I want a little bit of consistency, and then it's like, oh no, I want some of that Gemini chaotic, chaoticity, because it's not chaos. I can't say it's chaos. It's not chaos. It's chaoticity, right? So Diddy, it reminds me of like the um I valve. We're talking about like the air element, ion, and then it is like I don't know. That kind of reminds me. It's like almost like a U or a I. It's like in between there. You know what I mean? Blended, stuff like that. So I mean, I don't know what I would interpret that as, but if I was to use my common sense, I would assume you would blend those two together. So it would be somewhere between those two energies, aka the air, which is the I, or the high, going high, reaching for the sky, all that kind of stuff. And then the U, which would be like the water element. Yeah. Um, fire is like the vision, the first, the first spot. And then water is like U and O, that energy of like being in a container, U and O, like container, they hold like the O and the U, they both hold representing that water, which is tied to the feminine, holding, water holds shape, surrounded by whatever it may be. Anyways, that was a little bit of a tangent there as well, but you get some real wisdom and knowledge within my tangent, so it doesn't really matter. That's what I'm starting to realize, even though I do tangents, my tangents are like structured, progressive tangents. Like other times people go on tangents, like you end up going down like some path where you end up like coming 100 years into the future, 200 years into the future, and now you're like in a family who like uses control and domination to like constantly control everybody within like this realm of reality. And then you look at that as like some form of like an ego, something to validate your power. Actually, nothing like that. It's actually the opposite. You know what I mean? So back to that opposite energy of this title of the video, you know, the opposite day, meaning that the things that we do or the energies that we're in usually is tied to something opposite or has a solution in something opposite to what we originally may have set out to do. Now, what do I mean by what the heck? You know what I mean? Back up. So, what do I mean by this opposite energy? Okay, let me check if my volume is actually working, or I keep yabbing on, yabbing. Okay, looks like my microphone's working. All right. So, going into the details, going into the depth of this situation, we're looking at, okay, the reason why I even brought up this topic in the first place, because I've been thinking about it in general in my life. First, I see it in one characteristic, and then I see it in another scenario, and then I see it in another scenario, and then it leads me, like, to realize, like, a whole bunch more stuff about it, you know what I mean? But initially, the seed was planted in my mind due to watching Joel the Pilot, right? Peter Pan shadow back there. That's all I thought of when I saw that shadow. Peter Pan. How his shadow runs away. Anyway, you know, going back to the topic. Going back to the topic. Freaking I had heard this from Dollar and he said everything's in reverse. So when you look at the physical realm, how it is in the physical realm, it's actually in reverse on a spiritual set. All right. So when it comes to like, see now my mind is like going blank, but no, I know where I'm going. So when it comes to like dreams, for example, a lot of the time, this is another video I saw by Saint Bruno, shout out to him, but really put it into perspective of what I already like uh, was experiencing in terms of dreams being like the solution to your physical circumstance, right? So every time when we're in the external and we're physical, we find ourselves going to like into experiences and then going out of trying to get out of certain experiences like problems we would say, and we end up saying to ourselves, um, we end up saying, oh, see now I lost my train of thought. What the fuck, girl? No, I'm not allowed to like lose my train of thought. End up saying or thinking to themselves that they have to find the solution in the physical realm, right? They have to find the solution, so they look for all types of ways in the physical realm how to find that solution. But when it comes to that, you know, in actuality, he was mentioning that dreams was actually the solution to your problems in the physical realm. I'm pretty sure that was the title of the video, right? So, real interesting perspective because it makes a lot of sense. Because I've been doing that in general, and I've been noticing that in my own like personal experiences, especially since I started to know how to interpret my dreams properly. And then I was like, oh damn, like every time when you have a dream, that's actually like you can interpret it, you know how to interpret it, which is just understanding like things at their most basic form and looking at things like simply at the root of it in terms of an esoteric sense. So having a house, being inside a house, being inside in general, this shows that you're inside of yourself. You know what I mean? So because you're, or this is representing you being inside of yourself. So anytime you're inside, you're experiencing something internal. You know what I mean? So it's to do with your thoughts, your feelings, who you are. Right? Nothing to do with outside majority of the time. And then when it comes to outside, that's external. So that's anything there will represent real or other people. You know what I mean? So it won't represent something within you, or if it's not people, the people might represent situations, places, things. You know, they may come from that. But just looking at the energy of what that person represents and seeing that at its most basic and being able to look at it very, very minute and say, oh, okay, at the essence, at the core of what my perspective is of this person that's showing up in my dream, I know that they, when I see them, they represent these characters. And you can probably think of like, you just let go and you actually like just be be real with yourself. You know what I mean? Come down to that level of overstanding and being able. You're not really going to go down. You know what I mean? You're right above to be able to see it over, right? You know what I mean? So you're coming up to that level of overstanding and being able to see it from like a broader set, and you're like, okay, you'll be able to break down certain characteristics. Even if you just think of like one or a few, that's still something. But yeah, when it comes to that, that's a representation of something. So when we're in a physical, we feel like we have to go towards everything in the physical to fix that problem. But our solution is actually in the um, mental realm or the dream realm. So that's where we're creating our experience. So when you're able to look at your dreams, you're able to see the experience before it actually becomes physical. But you know, if you're dreaming about it in some way, shape, or form, that's your creation. You know, you wouldn't be dreaming about it in some way, or energetically, mentally, physically, or whatever. Energetically, pretty much physically. So, but what's it called? Yeah, all of that stuff with the dream. You know, that's the opposite day stuff. And then you look at other broader experiences, even more specific experiences that I've pinpointed from my own experience, right? When it comes to these certain um, things that I'll feel. Like I remember I made a video about it, about like 4, 6 months ago, I think it was. I don't know. May even be less than that. Might be 3 months. Anyway, time doesn't matter. You may be experiencing the video. Who knows? So yeah, when it comes to that video that I posted was, I think it was one of my lessons in law episodes. You know, episodes I say, but it's like not really like a full series. I mean, no, that's a series. That's a series. Anyway, so when it comes to um those videos, right, and those um energies, I was talking about in that video with the specific topic of when you're around certain energies and you're talking to people and you're like, got to get rid of those get those out. You know what I mean? Which, again, what are they called in Alice in Wonderland? Those things, you already know. If you've seen Alice in Wonderland, you know those things. You know what I mean? And you hear the sound, and you're like, oh yeah, those. Can't remember what they're called, but if you've seen it, you know. So anyway, I'll be dealing with that energy. You know what I mean? I'm getting all that energy up in my bitch, up in my hood. So just looking at that circumstance of when you're around certain energies or people in certain energies, and you may, because we're all relating in some way, shape, or form on a mental level, right? So in some way, shape, or form, you're going to be thinking one way or another with each individual person. This is why you all have different relations, you have a different connection, you have different energy that's like being created between you. So you're creating a different vibe, creating a different atmosphere. You know what I mean? So when it comes to that, you're around certain people, which is what I was saying in the video, you may feel obligated to do certain things. You may feel like it's bad not to do it, or whatever the case may be. And so I was like talking in that video how I've started to do the opposite of that, right? So I started saying to myself, oh, let me do the opposite of that energy. So whenever I feel guilty, like I should do something, I'm like, okay, I either won't do that thing or I'll modify it in a way where I'm pleasing myself, but technically not doing it anyway. That's beside the point. I don't want to get too deep into that. If you want to do it, you know what I mean. You'll be able to figure that out, I reckon. Anyway. Um, but just doing that opposite energy in some way, shape, or form, aka going against what your inner feeling is trying to push you to do, and it made me realize as well. And then because I was talking about it with someone, um, one of my people. That's a good one. You know what I mean? Now I'm thinking about. I've said it in my last videos. I'm like, oh, one of my friends. And I'm like, I don't like that word. People. I like that. You know what I mean? In English, you know what I mean? There's other words that have different languages that will, keep their energy different. When we're talking English, when we're talking bum bum, this is the way of it. The way it happens. This is the way it happens. You just got a bear. You just got to deal with it. Some way, shape, or form. But yeah, it reminded me about that video when we were talking about it today. There's that again. Alice in Wonderland. Alice in Wonderland. So yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that's that thing again. That's that little repetitive. I love to like psychoanalyze myself sometimes. Maybe I should stop roasting the fuck out of myself. I need to, but who gives a fuck? At the end of the day, it's constructive. I'm giving myself constructive criticism in life. You know what I mean? So that took me back to that video where Dolo was saying, Dolo Parliament, or Archangel Uriel, was saying, anytime you feel like everything is in reverse, and then he was saying, when you're feeling like you need to escape or get out of something or run from something, that's actually something you need to run from within yourself. Or and then I started to think to myself, like other kind of concept of like, oh, okay, so if I feel like I need to do something, then I do the opposite of that. So like running, feeling like you're running from something, and then being like, oh, okay, so I must need to get away or run away or escape out of a certain mental form. And then I'm like, okay, well, first of all, what's that fear mental form and what's that escape mental form coming from? You know what I mean? What emotion is that being like rooted in? Am I wanting to escape because I feel like I'm trapped, or am I wanting to escape because I feel afraid, whatever it may be? Um, so yeah, there's that freaking Alice in Wonderland. Again, this thing, get the hell out of here. This thing. So that got me into other parts of the conversation as I was putting all these different pieces together and seeing how like it really is like that. That's why I said the world is opposite day in form. Because as you start to put certain people together, you realize that everything that happens physically, in some way, there's a reverse to it in the spirit. All right. So, like for example, like you feel like you need to do a whole bunch of stuff, you need to get a whole bunch of stuff done, but like on an extreme level, then you may need to do the opposite. You may need to stop. You may need to give yourself time to rest, to recuperate. All that. So, it just depends on you and your own circumstance and experience. But if you're looking at things from a spiritual and a physical sense, then you'll be able to see how everything really is. All right. So even down to like this is another topic, like even down to certain characteristics that people may. So like you may meet people, and usually like this is an example I've known. Like usually when you meet people, like what you see is usually not what you get. So if you meet someone and they give off this like a certain energy, a lot of the times I've noticed they end up being in the opposite energy. So them giving off that energy, it's like again, it's like that external or that physical, and then their actual energy is like the spiritual, and it's reverse. Like so again, back to that opposite energy. So like specifically example, you think that like maybe when you're younger, you think that certain people may be like aggressive or blah 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 because of maybe like certain characteristics, like a physical characteristic or a personality characteristic that they have, and you may think to yourself that's the type of person that would be aggressive. But then, like, let's say, like one real stupid example is like you would think like or you wouldn't even think about this in general, but you know how you see those people who are like short or even dogs that are really small and they wouldn't look like they would hurt a fly, end up being like people like you don't want to fuck with. So it's like or versus when you see someone who's really really tall and has like a large stature and may even sometimes have certain features that make them look scary, and then you get to know them and they end up being like so soft, like soft to the point where that little one who comes off real like um tough, or like those little freaking little chihuahuas, you know what I mean, that end up like um being real aggressive, you know what I mean, out of nowhere. All of that kind of stuff is like you know, the opposite. They're giving off like the energy of cuteness, tininess, smallness, frailness, you know what I mean? And then you get to know them and that chihuahua like crazy as a motherfucker, you know what I mean? Or like another dog I met, it was like a sausage dog, wiener dog, whatever. That motherfucker was crazy. And she was real sweet to me, but she would end up going crazy at this other person that was at the house. Damn, damn, you don't want to fuck with her, you do not want to get on her bed. And then that's like even people I've met who are like on the shorter side. So it's good to pick up on. Mic check, check, check. Yeah. And then even people I've met in real life and they end up being short, real sweet, and then you get to know them and you're like, oh, this motherfucker is not to be trifled with. Do not trifle with this one. Do not. You will regret it. Like all of that kind of stuff. Just puts in perspective. Like, oh shit, shit really is in reverse. Okay, so the whole point of this video too, because I was going into the even deeper layer of that topic, right? Where looking at certain people who like they be like, oh, I'm rude or I'm a cunt, and those end up like people who tell you that, or they're like, I'm rude, I'm not a nice person sometimes, but I try, or whatever, whatever, along those lines. They end up being like some of the like nicest people you meet, and then like there's people who's like just puts on like that real nice, pretty face. Sometimes you get to know them, they end up being some of the people you do not want to fuck with. You know what I mean? So again, but that was not the best way to like sound like the same last part. So I guess round and round the merry-go-round. So yeah, just like being able to look at all of those different things and see all of those different angles of the same thing, or similar things, or different things, and being able to see how everything plays out in some way as an opposite or a reverse attribute that it plays out. You know, like you could look at so many different things in life, and you'll be able to like see how it's actually in reverse in the spiritual. But I'm sure people can get deeper into that. So I just wanted to like share like a little perspective. You know, even yeah, that reminded me of the shadow government too. You know what I mean? The shadow government in general try to put off this front like they have power, they have blah blah blah. Like, I think I said that earlier in the video. But we can see that even in real life, that we meet someone personally, if they're exerting themselves to be so overly um, powerful and strong and scary, we majority of the time, especially if you're smart enough, deep down that person is likely to not be that. In fact, they're probably like sometimes the least likely, and they put it on as a front, so it's like a cover so that they can shield their insecurity. You know what I mean? So it's layers to this bitch. All right, it's got layers. But you just you really be knowing. You know what I mean in life, like, and even down to like when people like how the system has raised us, like the shadow government and stuff. They be raising everyone to be like, oh, we don't know. But like in a spiritual sense, like we all do know. Like we know. Like how can we not know about life? How can you not know about life? You're life. You're a part of it. So for people to be indoctrinated and programmed that they don't know anything about life, that's like weird. Like you are born of that thing. So how do you think you don't understand the mechanism when you literally went through the mechanism? Like this is from a perspective of like seeing everything as like what it is, and being able to look at reality and see how things manifest and are created from like condensing and evaporation and condensing. Same way we see like everything with the physical evaporating, um, the clouds and all that. In the same way with the sun, that's like a hot cloud, so that's just a more evaporated cloud, which eventually will condense into an actual cloud, and then condense into water, and then water will condense into earth, and then like go round and round America. Then the fire transforms the earth, evaporates into the atmosphere, like so on and so forth. Evaporation, condensing, evaporation, condensing. Same way your thought, same way you manifest, right? You have the fire, the vision. Okay, I want this. That's you evaporate, right? You're evaporating and then it's rising up into the sky, right? Into that higher aspect, okay, you're like, oh, now you start to think about like how you want to go about that, like what kind of plan you want to have, so you're developing logical thought about that. Just like first it was just a spark, you know what I mean? Now you start to actually develop thoughts about said spark. And as you add thought, you know, okay, as you add thoughts to your own feeling that you're feeling, you're giving that like more weight, right? So you're accumulating more weight for the you're adding new thoughts, or you're just like focusing on it in general, giving it attention, right? You're accumulating that weight, and then that's ending up in a condensed. You know what I mean? Okay, you're cooling down. You need that water to help cool down as well, right? So it ends up falling down and condensing, and then it ends up um, going down into your own earthly realm for you to be able to manifest that as a physical experience. And all of these kind of traits, um, not traits, but all, like this process is something we see in all aspects, from the cloud, the sun, the sky, to our mind. So we end up evaporating, condensing, evaporating, condensing, externalize, internalize, externalize, so on and so forth. Expansion, contraction, all of that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So when you're looking at life from that perspective, you'll be able to understand or understand that you actually know a lot more than the shadow government person. They don't know. So they just have to create a whole bunch of stuff like scientists and a whole bunch of like um, badges and certificates to prove something that like should just be known. When you when you are something, you don't have to prove it. People just look at you and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I see this character." You know what I mean? I witnessed this character. And then that's how you be able to know if you're not, you know, already aware enough to be able to pick up on others. Then what's it called? Understanding that on a greater level, being able to see that the government and shadow government, Freemasons, whatever you want to call it, these people created a whole system based on like using something to prove what they are. But that by itself, that the seed of that energy in general comes from a space of you not being that. So you have to create a whole bunch of signs, symbols, words, structures, and systems and buildings to make yourself appear to be that. You know what I mean? But you're not that. Otherwise, you would just be that. You wouldn't have to create a whole bunch of stuff that perpetuate like a certain mind state, a certain system. People like pretty is a very animalistic one that a lot of people have been pushing. But it's always a give and take as well. You know what I mean? Certain things that like we as like like just your average spirit, well, not average. I don't want to say that. That when we're in like this mind state, like representing power, so it's nothing really average about that. I don't want to necessarily say average, but for lack of a better term, at this point in time, because I don't want to focus too much on the word, I just want to focus on the topic, right? Um, Look at us, you'll be able to see that. Wait, I had a point. No, I lost it. Let me just backtrack. I think I was talking about how everything's give and take, and at the end of the day, you're getting forced to do something, but also sort of allowing. You to. But you know, how much do you allow is the difference. Some people may have allowed more or less than others in certain situations when it's like interaction with shadow government. some people, some people may look at or or hear me and think, oh, like, you're talking about it as though like these are like specific people in this specific time. But I'm just talking about it in a broader sense because everyone ends up like reincarnating or you know incarnating into another realm in general, and in some way, shape, or form, we have some kind of connection or relationship with each other, whether we're physical or whether we're more lighter in weight, not so physical, not so dense. As spirits, we're still um, formulating some kind of relationship with each other. Even if that's not that's the problem. Relate, you cannot relate in some way, shape, or form. You're going to be interacting like pretty much majority of energies there even are in order for you to be existing. You know what I mean? In some way, shape, or form, we're all interacting. You know? So when it comes to that, you'll be able to understand that us as spirits, even though we may not all be physically here, when I'm talking about it in that broader sense, we're all collectively the same spirit. Reincarnation, incarnation, um, evaporation, condensing, you know, all of that kind of stuff. So, like, just as a disclaimer, because I know some people may hear this video and then they'll be like, okay, but you sound like you're talking about it as though I'm the specific person that is the reason to why my people got manipulated and colonized by the shadow government. It's not necessarily the case. It may not be necessarily the case, but you may be that person at the same time. That is possible. You know what I mean? So, when it comes to the topic that I'm talking about, I'm just talking about it in a broader sense. Okay? But you still may be that person. So, like, you may be that person reincarnated or whatever. It's just, it's just very interesting when you see it from that perspective. You know what I mean? And start to see things from a more clearer aspect, and it makes me realize as well, like when certain times, in the past, I've been looked at as being negative or certain things, um, and I used to put those on to myself and wonder, like, go away, go away. So in the past, I've taken that on, and I've been like, oh, you know what? Actually, maybe I'm actually negative, or maybe that was me. But now I see like more in the future now, and I'm still done similar things, and I'm starting to see that it may not necessarily be negative. It may be a way of like how I'd actually gone about it that may have been made it perceived as negative, or it may have just been that person in general just not being able to see eye to eye with me. But in some way, shape, or form, you know what I mean? That's also maybe something that I haven't done in my inner work. Because why am I trying to make someone see eye to eye with me? Also, you know, why is that person not able to relate to what I'm saying? Maybe there's something that I'm not uh, properly grasping. Maybe, you know what I mean? Just having that self awareness is good. So, you know, now I'm like, oh, starting to make me think about that topic again, right? And it's like, oh, okay, so in a world where people are devilish, demonic, being angelic will look like that demonic energy. And it's something even Dolo said on his video as well. I remember he said it in similar words. He said, when an angel comes down, demons see the angel as a demon, something like that. Wasn't that something along those lines? And yeah, that's like I've seen that in so many aspects, and that goes back to that. Yeah, everything is reverse. So when we're in a world of demonic energy, then um, what's demonic will look angelic, and what's angelic will look demonic. So that's like main topic of this video, and I just freaking like explained it on every level that I reckon makes sense. I might have missed something. If I did, probably come back to the topic again. You know what I mean? But like when you're explaining live and shit like that, a lot of it ends up you end up realizing a lot of things are because there's a certain mechanism. So a lot of things are just that. So I end up explaining them in other videos because it ties in and they're interconnected all the way down to like what people perceive as karma. What people perceive as karma, it may not um, necessarily work exactly the way people perceive it, although it's still a thing. But it goes back to that evaporation of condensation and how we're all creating our own like mind and then condensing that into a physical form as spirit. So this is why we can change mind, we can change personality, we can like um, change how we see it, we can change everything within our mental. We're creating, we're building that spirit, right? So you can change your physical as well, but that's physical. Then the effects would be more fast. You'll still be able to be you unless your physical ends up dying. Okay, go to another, So when it comes to this energy or this topic, sorry, I say energy with karma, it's talking about your actual like space energy. That's the kind of energy that you're going to pull back, going to attract you to end up being in a space, end up being in a space of like either negativity or whatever, whatever energy that. Right. Anyways, I think I'm gonna leave this video at that, and I will see you guys in the next video. Right. Hope you guys have a beautiful day. Uh, Whatever the heck it is over there, where you are, maybe you don't go by one. Maybe you go by something. Maybe you go by, who knows. I'm not gonna go into that because that's your business. Right? So, yeah, hope you guys have a beautiful time. Thank you so much, friends.